I imagine that if you're a Monster Hunter fan, you have likely seen that the first trailer came out yesterday, and we got a lot of, maybe not in-depth information, but some very interesting things have been revealed. And as someone who is excited for the game, I'm just gonna put out a basic video talking about my thoughts on some of the things I've observed. First of all, just look at how vast this world looks. They talked about this being like a single area, so presumably still not a fully open world game, which based on the size of this map, I don't really think it matters. Having several areas that are, based on the appearance, maybe 2-3 times bigger than the hunting areas in World/Iceborne, there's a good chance that it's gonna feel like a massive open world that just has several different maps to choose from. Now they're leaning heavy into this ever-changing climate where the world kind of changes over time, and you can see in the background footage the monsters that are there change depending on how the climate is, and that this is supposed to be a dynamic climate that I guess goes back and forth depending on the weather cycle or something. It's an interesting thing that we haven't seen in previous games. Also, just the sheer amount of small monsters in this area in the background footage, it's kind of massive compared to even World, which does have a decent chunk of small monsters in the different areas. This is on a much larger scale than what the series has had previously, which I hope the game has more to do with those aspects, but I guess we'll see in gameplay how it actually plays out. And of course they have more showcase of this mechanic where there's grass here, and then it kind of just turns gray and there's less grass. It's very interesting. And supposedly I think the monsters that are there change, yeah. Definitely a cool concept that I hope has a good bit of gameplay attached to it and is more than just, you know, the world ambience. They also decided to show off monster herds, so like there's the big herds of the small monsters, and even large monsters can come in groups now. That is pretty cool, though I do have a slight concern about that, but I'll get to that later. Of course, this is the name of the chicken. I'm not going to try to pronounce that until I hear an official pronunciation of it, because I am bad with names. And this acts a lot like a Palamute in Rise, except you can stash an extra weapon, and you can just swap to it whenever you feel like it. That is pretty cool. Which may also suggest that there could be sudden changes in the environment that perhaps your weapon loadout would not actually be prepared for, so you'd have to have a backup. This extra amount of preparation is definitely making me think that there are some difficulty mechanics that we haven't seen yet that may justify having access to a spare weapon. Although I wonder if the extra weapon also comes with an armor loadout, because imagine having to have a single armor loadout for both a gun lance and a dual blades. That actually would be very difficult to build out a single armor set for 2 weapons. So hopefully this weapon swap comes with an armor swap, but from what it seems to indicate, I don't think it does. We'll have to wait and see to know for sure. But if it does not come with an armor swap, or at least a decoration swap, you're gonna have to pick 2 weapons that actually share the same amount of decorations, or the same kind of decorations, which is gonna make using gun lance absolutely atrocious because it needs so many specific skills. Man, I hope they buff gun lance. Now, the Windward Plains is the area they showed off. It looks huge, and it does have different kind of combat zones. There's like these plains, and there's this deserty area, like dunes and stuff, and then it goes to this more rocky section. This specifically kind of reminds me of like Coral Highland stuff, mixed with like the Wildspire Waste. That's kind of what Windward Plains looks like, a combination of those two, but this doesn't obviously have all the like coral bits in it as much as it just shares similar design structures. They did, of course, show off new monsters. Chotacabra is kind of what that looks like it's supposed to be. Interesting design, of course. And then this guy, which kind of looks like a lion, maybe mixed with a bear, kind of a bear-lion sort of thing. It is cool that they're adding more beast-like monsters, because there tends to not be enough of those. So all of these new aspects that we saw, and more specifically in the trailer itself, some new weapon mechanics, as well as some returning mechanics like the slinger. This will probably make for a game that feels a lot like World, but is also going to feel a little bit like Rise too, I think. Just based on the combat flow where they showed off Greatsword, it looks like it has more mobility than it does in World, without being as crazy as it is in Rise with wire bugs, which, by the way, didn't see a single wire bug. It does look like the combat's going to be a bit more involved, especially with multiple large monsters attacking you at the same time. That is going to be interesting, and I think while that is probably one of the coolest new mechanics that they've added, it also is one of the more concerning ones in my mind, because on the surface this looks like the perfect Monster Hunter experience. It's so good, but there is a way that it could end up just being completely ruined, and what that will depend on is the combat balance for this game. Now, on the surface it looks like having all of these extra mechanics is going to make your hunter a lot stronger, and that the way to balance that out is, well, now these large monsters that you're used to hunting solo can now hunt in packs, so that while you have these extra mechanics, you're gonna need them just to survive that hunt. But I think what I'm more concerned about with the combat balance is, what are the hit points of monsters gonna be? And if you're fighting a pack of monsters, are they gonna have reduced hit points to facilitate them being in a group, as well as the balance of like staggers and part breaks? In a multi-large monster pack hunt sort of scenario, it would make sense if they really cranked up how often you can stagger a monster, so that you can back one of them off while another one's about to attack you, kind of thing. Which, if the game plays more like that, I actually think this game's going to be incredible and better than any other Monster Hunter game ever, because that'll give the combat a lot more depth and back and forth between you and the monster, which really was my biggest complaint about Rise. The combat's so arcadey that it feels like the entirety of the fight you just spam the highest DPS move and that's all you do, which is painful when you use a low DPS weapon like Gunlance. So I'm hoping this game does not fall into that trap of, oh, we're just gonna make the HP pools higher than ever because we know y'all are better than ever, so have fun figuring out what move does the highest amount of damage and just spamming that one to win. I hope they don't use hit points and DPS checking as a means of difficulty, because it really takes away the fun of going out and hunting a monster, because you can't take the time to actually appreciate the world the monster's in if the hit points are scaled up so much that you have to just focus it down as fast as possible and figure out what moves do the most damage to it consistently. I think a more back and forth style combat where you have attacks that can regularly back a monster off of you, I think that would actually be really cool, especially in multi-monster hunts. But also not have the hit points so high that it doesn't feel like a chore to fight a monster and it's actually like engaging. Which for the most part, World has done a decent job of that. I think Master Rank, the hit points on some monsters could still be a little bit too much, because while a veteran or speedrunner can kill any monster in under 5 minutes, I would prefer to not have to focus on beating the timer more than actually beating the monster. So that is my one concern, is just the combat balance of the game. Everything else though looks awesome, and I think that regardless of how close it is to my expectations or not, it's gonna be an awesome game for the most part. As long as it actually, runs properly, doesn't crash a bajillion times and have the modern AAA experience where it's just bad. But if they can nail the combat balance, this is definitely going to be one of, if not the best game that we've seen in a long time. But please, man, can you just give Gunlance a little more damage? It's always been an underperformer in Monster Hunter. But anyway, that's enough rambling from me about this. I'm curious your thoughts of what you consider to be exciting about the game and potential concerns you may have as well. Because while I'm definitely looking forward to this game, I am a little skeptical of the combat balance still. I guess we'll just have to wait and see for when it actually launches. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time.